Why did one harmless chat in the garden turn into a lawful ending of my marriage? How did my husband's quiet notice become the moment everything I'd hidden came into the light? What begins as a friendly talk ends with papers in my hand and no words left to say. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I swear it started as nothing, just a talk in the garden that went on longer than it should have. The air was soft, the lights warm, and Evan, my ex, kept saying things that made me feel seen again. It didn't feel wrong, not really. Gareth, my husband, was inside working on something as usual. I told myself he wouldn't even notice, but he did. He always does. Later, he asked why we stayed out there so long, and I laughed it off, said he was being dramatic. He didn't argue, he just nodded once and went quiet. That quiet has weight now, like a wall I can't see through. I kept telling people he was controlling, that he didn't trust me, that I needed space to breathe. Everyone believed me, my sister, my friends, even my mother. I thought I was winning. But something in Gareth's silence changed. The printer started at odd hours. His phone buzzed with calendar alerts, and when he said, "I'll handle this properly," I still thought it was about feelings. I didn't know it meant paperwork. I'm Isolde Maren, and that evening in the garden still replays in my head like a scene I can't rewrite. It started so simply. Evan was there with his sketches and his calm voice explaining how the new trellis would look against the fence. The sunset threw gold across everything, and for the first time in weeks, someone looked at me like I mattered. Gareth had asked him to quote for the garden work months ago, but he never expected I'd be the one outside helping choose colours. I told myself it was polite, that I was being friendly. That's how I always justify things at first. Evan talked about plants the way other people talk about art. He said certain flowers only open in twilight because they crave attention when everything else fades. I laughed because it sounded like something I'd say. I told him my husband never noticed details like that anymore, that everything in our house was practical and dull. He said maybe Gareth was too busy keeping things running. I said that was convenient, a man hiding behind schedules so he wouldn't have to be present. Evan smiled like he understood. Through the kitchen window, Gareth was at the sink rinsing a cup. He looked out once, not long enough to seem suspicious, just long enough to make my chest tighten. I waved, exaggerated and bright, pretending nothing about it felt wrong. Evan glanced at him too, lowered his voice slightly and said he should get going soon. I told him there was no rush. The words came out too quickly. We talked about the past, of course, about the small apartment we'd shared for half a year when everything was wild and unplanned. He said I hadn't changed, still restless, still reaching for something that didn't exist. I asked what that meant and he said, "You always wanted to be understood more than loved." I laughed because it was true. I told him Gareth loved me but didn't get me, and there's a difference. By the time I looked at my phone, it was almost 10. The garden lights had come on, soft yellow circles on the path. Gareth had sent a message. "Are you coming in soon?" I ignored it and kept talking. I told Evan about Milo's school, about how motherhood made me invisible. He said I was still beautiful. The word landed like a match. When I finally went inside, Gareth was at the table with his laptop open. He didn't look up right away. The blue light made his face unreadable. I said Evan had been giving me ideas for the garden layout. Gareth said he thought Evan was finished weeks ago. I said we were just catching up. He nodded slowly, still typing. Then he asked, "Do you want me to wait for you to finish talking to him next time?" I laughed. "You sound jealous." He said, "I sound observant." That annoyed me. I told him not everything was about him, that sometimes two people can just talk without it being a scandal. He didn't respond, only closed his laptop and placed his mug on the far corner of the counter. A small, deliberate distance. Later, when I told Pippa about it, she said Gareth was acting possessive. He's scared of losing control, she said. You deserve to feel wanted. I liked how that sounded, like I was rebelling against boredom instead of wrecking something stable. The next morning, Gareth left earlier than usual. His side of the bed was cold, perfectly smooth. In the kitchen, 2 mugs waited on opposite sides of the counter again, one spotless, one with coffee stains around the rim. I poured myself a new cup and opened the patio door. Evan's tape measure lay forgotten on the grass. I picked it up and brushed off the dew. The smell of earth clung to my fingers, something alive and secret. When Gareth came home that evening, he was polite, too polite. He asked about my day like he was interviewing a stranger. I filled the silence with stories about the garden plans, how Evan might return next week to finish the design. He said, "You seem excited." I said, "Someone has to be." He didn't rise to it. He just smiled that calm, distant smile and turned on the dishwasher. The hum filled the room. I checked his phone on the counter out of habit. Screen locked, no notifications except a calendar alert. Meeting, personal 11:15 a.m. I almost asked what it was for, but he'd already walked into the hall. That night, I dreamed of the garden again, of moonlight on white flowers that only open when everything else sleeps. When I woke, Gareth was in the guest room, door closed. I pressed my ear against it, but heard nothing except the faint click of a keyboard. Over breakfast, he said he might work late tomorrow. I teased him about being allergic to free time. He said, "You seem to enjoy yours." I laughed and told him he sounded bitter. He said, "No, I'm taking notes." I told Pippa that too. She laughed and said he was trying to guilt-trip me. "Men keep lists because they don't know how to talk," she said. I believed her. By midweek, Evan texted asking if he could drop by with the final layout. I said sure, come around 6. I didn't tell Gareth. When Evan arrived, he brought wine instead of tools. I told him I couldn't drink much because of Milo's bedtime routine, but he poured 2 glasses anyway. We stood near the lilac bush, the one Gareth planted years ago when things were still warm between us. Evan said he missed this kind of peace. I said peace was overrated. The sound of the sliding door opening made me jump. Gareth stepped out, calm as ever, tie loosened, eyes scanning the table with the open bottle. "Didn't know we had company," he said. I smiled too wide, said it was last minute, nothing serious. He looked at Evan, then at me, and said, "Enjoy your evening." He went back inside, leaving the door slightly open. Evan whispered, "He's upset." I said, "He'll get over it." But something in Gareth's face before he turned away told me this wasn't one of those things you just get over. Later, when Evan left, I found Gareth sitting in the living room, reading. He didn't look up when I entered. I asked if he was mad. He said, "No, I'm noting things again." I asked what that meant, and he said, "It helps me remember what's real." I told him he was being cryptic. He said, "You prefer people who say too much." I wanted to snap back, but the calm in his tone disarmed me. I went upstairs instead, telling myself he was sulking. But in the hall, I saw the faint glow of his computer from the guest room. A printer clicked once, releasing a blank page. The smell of toner filled the air. I stood there, not sure why my chest felt tight. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Or maybe the first sign that Gareth's silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I told myself to stop imagining things, to get some sleep. Tomorrow would be normal again. But even as I lay in bed, I could still hear that quiet mechanical sound from down the hall. Soft, steady, recording everything I thought he'd never notice. Monday mornings always start the same, except now the quiet between us feels too careful. Gareth sits at the table with his tablet open, scrolling through headlines, while I pack Milo's lunch and pretend everything's normal. He asks if I remembered the parent form for Friday. I tell him yes, even though it's still blank on the counter. He doesn't correct me. He just takes a sip of coffee, checks his watch, and says he'll be home later than usual. Then, as he leaves, I see the reflection of his phone screen in the window, another meeting personal reminder. Same time as last week. I almost ask, but instead I wave from the doorway and act unbothered. At work, the office feels lighter. My co-workers, especially the ones who followed me on social media, have seen the photo Evan tagged me in, the one under the garden lights. "You two look good together," Jenna says, grinning. I laugh and tell her not to start rumors. She says, "Well, if my husband stared at me like that, I wouldn't be complaining." I roll my eyes, but the attention warms me. I tell myself it's harmless, just banter, though a small part of me enjoys being the center of something again. By lunch, the gossip has turned into a running joke. They call me Garden Girl, teasing about secret admirers and moonlight meetings. I play along, telling them Gareth trusts me completely. The words come out too easily. Later, when I check my phone, I notice Gareth has viewed one of my story posts. Just a picture of the garden with the caption, "New Beginnings." He doesn't react. No emoji, no comment. I screenshot it anyway, sending it to Pippa with a laughing face. She replies, "He's probably sulking. Don't let him ruin your vibe." That evening, Gareth's car is already in the driveway when I get home. Inside, the lights are low and the dishwasher hums. He's sitting at the dining table again, a half-empty glass of water beside him, a folder open with what looks like utility bills spread out neatly. I say I didn't know he'd be home early. He says, "Plans changed." I ask if everything's okay. He nods. I try to keep the conversation light, mentioning the photo Evan posted. Gareth says he saw it. I tell him people need to relax. It's just social media. He says, people show what they want others to see. The air feels dense. I ask if he's implying something. He looks at me and says, "You tell me." I hate when he does that. Ask questions that sound like answers. I snap, saying he should try trusting his wife for once. He says, "I do. I trust you to be yourself." I don't know what that means, but it sounds like an insult. I grab my glass, fill it with water, and drink it just to have something to do with my hands. When I leave the kitchen, he's already gathering the papers, slipping them into a folder labeled Household. That night, I dream of standing in the garden again, except the lights flicker, and Gareth is watching from the window with a pen in his hand, writing something down. I wake up unsettled. The next morning, I notice a faint smell of toner near his desk again. Wednesday, Evan texts, asking if I'd like to meet for coffee to discuss a new project. I hesitate, then agree. We meet at the cafe near my office, the one with the big glass front where everyone can see in. He compliments my blouse, says it matches the garden roses. I laugh, telling him he's dramatic. We talk about normal things, work, the weather, his upcoming travel, but there's an undertone to it, a small charge in the pauses. When he reaches across the table to brush a crumb from my sleeve, I don't move away. I don't notice Gareth until the end. He's outside on the opposite sidewalk, checking his phone as if he's waiting for someone. He doesn't look up. I freeze, unsure if he's seen us. Evan asks what's wrong, and I say nothing, just that I should get back. When I get home that evening, Gareth greets me the same as always, calm, polite. No mention of the cafe, no hint of accusation. That calmness bothers me more than any argument could. Pippa calls later, wanting details. I tell her Gareth's acting like everything's fine, which somehow makes me feel guilty. She says guilt is just conditioning, that men use silence to manipulate. I want to believe her. She tells me to post something cute, to remind people I'm confident. So I do, a smiling selfie with a caption about finding balance. Within minutes, likes start pouring in. Evan leaves a single flame emoji. The next morning, Gareth's mug is gone from its usual place. In its spot sits a new one, plain white, untouched. His old mug is on the opposite counter. I stare at the distance between them, ridiculous but symbolic. While making coffee, I notice a sticky note near the fridge. Bring forms. No context. I ask what it's for when he comes down. He says, just errands. I ask again. He repeats it. His tone leaves no room for more questions. At work, Jenna shows me something. One of her friends from the cafe posted a story that caught a piece of me and Evan in the background. It's trending in our office group chat, she says, laughing. I brush it off, saying people love drama. But my stomach drops when I see the view count, over 100, including Gareth's account. That night, he asks how my day was. I tell him busy. He nods, washing his plate after dinner, the running water filling the silence. I ask if we're okay. He says, we're stable. The word feels wrong, like a diagnosis instead of comfort. I try to touch his arm, but he steps aside to reach for the towel. My fingers hang in the air. Later, I find him in the guest room again. This time, there's a folder on the desk labeled bank. I joke that he's turning into an accountant. He says, numbers tell the truth. I say, so do people. He says, not always. I leave before he can see my face tighten. By Friday, the whispers have reached Lorna. She calls, asking if everything's all right at home. Her tone is careful, too polite. I say yes, of course. Why? She says she heard something about a cafe, a photo. I tell her people exaggerate. She says, I hope so. Gareth's been quiet lately. I make a joke about him being allergic to gossip. She doesn't laugh. That night, Pippa and I go out for drinks. I tell her I'm done walking on eggshells, that Gareth needs to loosen up. She says I should let him see how independent I can be. So we take a few photos at the bar. Laughing, glasses raised, I tag the location. The next morning, Gareth has already left. On the counter, a faint coffee ring sits next to his notebook. The page on top has a date and time written neatly. Storage delivery, 2 p.m. I stare at it for a while, trying to decide if it means anything. Maybe it's just another project. Maybe not. I want to ask, but instead I close the notebook. The air in the house feels thinner, like something has shifted again. That evening, Evan messages, "You looked amazing last night." I type and delete several replies before settling on a simple, "Thanks." I notice Gareth's reflection in the dark kitchen window as I hit send. He's standing behind me, silent, watching the phone light fade. He doesn't say a word. Just reaches past me, takes his cup and rinses it. The sound of running water is soft but endless. When he dries the cup, he sets it down on the far edge of the counter again, his side, separate from mine. Then he turns, calm as ever, and says, "You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day." I ask why. He says, "You'll see." And for the first time, I believe him. Saturday arrives bright and deceptive, the kind of morning that looks too clean for trouble. Milo wakes first, padding into our room with his toy truck, asking if he can play in the garden. I tell him yes, half asleep, half grateful for a reason not to face Gareth right away. The sound of the lawnmower starts outside before I've even had coffee. When I step out onto the porch, Gareth is already in the yard, crisp white shirt tucked in, moving with calm precision. The mower lines are perfect, each stripe even as if measured by ruler. Evan texts, "Hope you're around later." I have a few updates for the layout. I type back, "Sure," without thinking. When I glance at Gareth, he's crouched by the flower bed, tying the hose neatly into a coil. It hits me that he's rearranging everything, space, time, control, while saying nothing. At breakfast, he pours juice for Milo, then sits across from me. "There's a neighborhood barbecue tonight," he says. I nod, pretending I already knew. "It'll be good for everyone," he adds. I hear what he doesn't say, for appearances. I spend most of the day fussing over outfits, pretending I care about what to wear. Pippa texts a string of emojis and says, "Be confident, people should see you happy." I read it twice and almost believe her. By 6, the house smells like sunscreen and charcoal. The barbecue is next door. in the Jamesons' yard. Tables covered in bright cloths, music low, children running with juice boxes. Gareth carries the potato salad I made and sets it on the buffet like it's an offering. He greets people calmly, politely, and I find myself irritated by his serenity. Evan arrives late, wearing a crisp blue shirt and carrying a bottle of wine. When he waves from the gate, I feel something inside me tighten and lift all at once. Gareth notices. He doesn't scowl or frown, just watches. That's worse somehow. He spends most of the evening talking with Mr. Jameson about mortgages, while I float between groups, laughing too loudly at stories that aren't funny. A few neighbours tease about the garden project and how Evan's done wonders back there. I say it's still in progress, that he has an artist's touch. Someone whistles playfully, and I grin. Evan eventually joins our circle, holding 2 glasses. "You look like you could use one," he says, handing me the red wine. Gareth glances over, then back to his conversation, steady as ever. I feel a spark of triumph. If he won't fight for me, at least he'll have to see someone else will. The music changes, something soft and nostalgic. Evan nudges me toward the patio lights. "Come on," he murmurs, "it's just a song." My heart kicks hard against reason. People are watching, but I don't care. I step forward. We sway, barely moving. For a few minutes it's like old times. His hand steady at my waist, his voice low, telling me I still haven't changed. When the song ends, polite applause scatters through the crowd. I curtsy playfully, but Gareth's gaze cuts through the noise. He isn't smiling. He lifts his glass, nods once, and turns back toward the house. The gesture is small, but it feels final. Later, I find him in the kitchen. "You left early," I say, trying for casual. He nods. "Tired," he says. I ask if he saw the dance. He says, "Everyone did." I tell him he's overreacting, that it was nothing. "You keep saying that word," he murmurs. "One day you'll believe it." I want to shout, to demand he act jealous, human, anything. Instead, he rinses his plate and says, "Don't wait up." When he leaves the kitchen, I notice the faint hum of the printer again from the study. The next morning, the air is heavy with humidity. Milo is at Lorna's for the weekend, so it's just us. I make coffee, hoping to bridge the silence. "You've been quiet," I say. He looks up from his phone. "Am I?" he says mildly. I tell him I miss when we could talk about things without it turning into this. He says, "We're talking now." The sarcasm burns, though he delivers it like a fact. I ask what's going on with him lately, why the folders, the lists, the meetings. He says, "You'll know soon enough." Then he gets up and leaves the table, taking his mug with him as always. In the afternoon, Pippa calls. "The barbecue was all over social," she says. "You looked amazing. That little dance got people talking." I ask if she means good or bad. She laughs. "Who cares? You were glowing." She tells me to post one of the photos before someone else does. So I do. I crop Gareth out and caption it, "Finding my rhythm again." By evening, Evan comments with a heart emoji. A coworker writes, "Couple goals." The likes climb fast. I know Gareth will see it eventually. Part of me wants him to. When I hear his car in the driveway, I lock my phone and start tidying up, pretending I've been busy all day. He enters quietly, carrying a small paper bag. "Picked up dinner," he says, setting it on the counter. I say we could have eaten together at the barbecue leftovers. He says, "I prefer food that hasn't been discussed by half the neighborhood." I flush. "You're paranoid," I say. He looks at me then, really looks, and says, "No, just informed." That night, I wander into the study after he falls asleep. The desk is clear except for a single USB drive, labeled with yesterday's date. I pick it up, turn it over, then set it back. The printer light blinks faintly like a heartbeat. The next day, a small moment shifts everything. At the supermarket, I run into one of the Jameson women. She smiles awkwardly, says she hopes Gareth isn't upset about the barbecue. I laugh, pretending not to understand. She hesitates, then says, "Someone recorded your dance. It's online. Just a short clip, nothing bad." My stomach drops. When I get home, Gareth is in the living room, sorting papers into 2 stacks. "Did you see the video?" I blurt out. He looks up calmly. "Yes." I say, "It's exaggerated. People always twist things." He says, "They didn't twist anything. The camera doesn't have feelings." I tell him he's being cold. He says, "Warmth requires respect." His tone is quiet, steady. I can't find words that sound right. He gathers the papers, slips them into a large envelope and leaves the room. I text Pippa in panic, telling her people are being dramatic, that Gareth's acting like it's the end of the world. She replies, "He's just embarrassed. Let it blow over. You're the one with the attention right now. Use it." I take her advice. I post again that night, a photo of the garden glowing under the lights, captioned "Peace blooms when you stop apologizing." Comments flood in. Evan messages, "You've still got that magic." When I wake the next morning, Gareth is already gone. The house feels organized in a way that unsettles me. No clutter, no stray toys, no dishes in the sink. On the counter, a faint coffee stain forms the shape of a ring beside a folded napkin. A list is written in Gareth's handwriting. Bank, storage, notary near me. I read it twice, unsure whether to feel guilty or terrified. I tell myself it's work stuff. Still, the thought of him writing notary makes my throat tighten. That evening he returns late. I try to act cheerful, but he's unreadable. I tell him Milo misses him. He nods. Then, while putting away his jacket, he says, "We'll talk soon. Properly." I ask what that means. He looks at me over his shoulder. "It means I'm done arguing. I'm making arrangements." He says it like a weather report, calm, factual, inevitable. I want to demand details, but he's already turned away, walking down the hall toward that glowing room again, where the printer hums and papers slide out one after another, soft as breath. Outside, the garden lights flicker against the window pane. The same garden where everything began, where I thought I was just being seen again. Now it feels like a stage that someone else built, and I'm still out there performing, too proud to step off, too scared to look at the empty seats. Sunday lunches at Lorna's used to be harmless. Roast chicken, polite chatter, Milo running circles around the table, while Gareth and his father discussed football or house repairs. This one feels different from the start. The sky outside is heavy, and the drive over is quiet except for the radio. Gareth turns it off halfway through a song I like. I ask if something's wrong. He says no, but his voice is too calm again. That tone that means yes, everything is wrong. When we walk in, Lorna greets Milo first. She hugs him tight, smells his hair, tells him he's growing too fast. For me, she offers a small smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Gareth's father nods, polite but distant. The table is already set, perfect as always. Gareth takes the seat across from me instead of next to me. I notice it, everyone does, but no one says a word. Halfway through lunch, Milo starts chattering about the garden. He tells Lorna that Mr. Evan is teaching him about plants, that they found worms and made a little fort near the lilac bush. I freeze. Gareth sets his fork down softly. Lorna's eyes shift from Milo to me. I laugh too loudly, saying Evan's just finishing the project. Gareth says, "Apparently, it's an ongoing education now." The table goes quiet. I reach for my water glass to hide my shaking hand. I tell Milo to eat his potatoes. He doesn't notice the tension. He keeps talking about flowers and worms. Lorna changes the subject to school, but the air doesn't lighten. I can feel Gareth's gaze even when he's not looking at me directly. After lunch, Lorna insists we stay for dessert. She and I clear plates while Gareth takes Milo outside. She watches me from the corner of her eye while drying her hands. "You've been keeping busy," she says. I smile, trying to. The garden's been a nice distraction. She doesn't reply right away. Gareth said it's been expensive. I say, he exaggerates. It's worth it. She folds the towel carefully. Some things cost more than money, Isolde. I pretend not to hear. She adds, you're not yourself lately. I hope whatever you're doing doesn't hurt Milo. That tone, half warning, half plea, makes my throat tighten. I tell her she doesn't need to worry, that I'd never do anything wrong. I'm sure you believe that, she says softly. When we get home, Gareth says nothing. He helps Milo out of the car, thanks me for handling dessert, and disappears into the guest room again. I pace the hallway, angry without knowing exactly why. It feels unfair, being treated like a criminal for having a conversation. I call Pippa. She's out shopping with friends, her voice echoing through the mall. I tell her about lunch, about Lorna's little jabs. She laughs. Mother-in-law guilt trips are ancient art. Ignore her. I tell her Gareth keeps acting like he's preparing for something. She says, he's bluffing. He'd never risk losing you. He just wants to scare you. I want to believe her. That night, Gareth doesn't come to bed. I check the guest room. Door closed, faint tapping of keys. I lean against it and whisper his name. He doesn't answer. I try the handle, but it's locked. For the first time, the lock feels personal, like he's keeping me out of something that belongs to both of us. Monday morning, the house smells like paper and detergent. On the kitchen counter sits a neat stack of folded laundry, his shirts pressed. Beside it, a folder marked Utilities. I open it halfway before hearing his footsteps behind me. Looking for something? He asks. I say I thought it was mail. He walks past me, picks up the folder, and says, it's organized now. I try to joke that he's turning into his mother. He says, someone should. At work, I can't focus. My manager calls me into her office, asks if everything's okay at home. I laugh, tell her it's fine. She says someone emailed her a photo of me from the barbecue, apparently making rounds online, tagged with my name. She says it's not company business, but perhaps unwise optics. My stomach drops. I tell her people are jealous, exaggerating. She nods politely, but her eyes are cool. That evening, I find Gareth at the dining table helping Milo with homework. He's patient, smiling softly as Milo draws a picture of their garden fort. When I walk in, they both fall silent. I sit beside them, trying to join in. Milo shows me his drawing, stick figures, one tall, one short. That's you and Mr. Evan, he says proudly. Gareth looks at it for a long second, then says, very creative. His tone isn't sharp, but it cuts anyway. After Milo goes to bed, I tell Gareth he's making things awkward. He says, truth makes people uncomfortable. I say he's being cryptic again. He says, maybe you should start listening. I tell him I'm tired of this quiet punishment. He answers, it's not punishment, it's documentation. That word again. I snap, asking what he's documenting. He just looks at me. Whatever happens, he says. I slam the cabinet door and tell him he's paranoid, that I won't live like this. He says, you already are. Later, I pour wine and call Pippa again. She says I sound dramatic, that Gareth's trying to twist everything. You didn't do anything wrong, she repeats. He's the one acting suspicious. I cling to her words like a rope. After we hang up, I check Gareth's drawer in the hallway. Inside, neat rows of labeled envelopes, household, bank, receipts, insurance, each in perfect order. One envelope, slightly open, reveals a small USB labeled with last week's date. I hold it between my fingers, half tempted to plug it in. Then I hear footsteps. I drop it back and close the drawer. Gareth steps into the hallway, calm as ever. Looking for something again, he says. I tell him I was just cleaning. He nods. You should get some rest. The next morning, I wake up alone again. A text from Lorna waits on my phone. I hope you can find peace before he stops trying. I throw the phone onto the bed. The day drags. At lunch, I overhear co-workers whispering about me. One says, that's the woman from the barbecue clip. I pretend not to hear, but heat rushes up my neck. When I get home, I find Gareth and Lorna sitting in the living room. She looks composed. He looks steady, unreadable. "We need to talk," he says. I ask what's going on. Lorna folds her hands. "This isn't an ambush, dear. We're just worried." I laugh, too sharp. "Worried about what? That I have friends?" Gareth says, "About choices." I tell them to stop treating me like a child. Lorna stands, "Then stop behaving like one." Something inside me breaks. I shout that she's poisoning him against me, that she's jealous of how I make him feel. Her face doesn't change. "You make him feel tired," she says. Gareth quietly asks her to leave the rest to him. She squeezes his shoulder and goes, leaving her perfume hanging in the air. I turn on him. "You bring your mother here to lecture me?" He says, "She asked to come. She's not the only one who notices." I tell him I'm done talking until he apologizes for humiliating me in my own house. He doesn't flinch. I'm done apologizing for seeing clearly. We stand there in silence until Milo's voice drifts from upstairs, calling for water. Gareth goes to him without another word. I'm left staring at the half-empty wine glass on the counter, the one I poured before Lorna arrived. When they're both asleep, I walk to the garden. The lights flicker again. Everything looks perfect. Too perfect. The path is swept, the chairs are lined, the trellis Evan built standing tall. But it feels like someone else's yard now. Too precise, too final. On the patio table sits a note in Gareth's handwriting. Tomorrow, 9:30. No explanation. I go inside, my pulse racing, and crawl into bed. The printer hums once more from the guest room, steady and patient, like it knows how this story will end, even if I still pretend not to. Monday begins with quiet efficiency, Gareth moving through the kitchen like he's rehearsing calm. Every movement measured. Mug, coffee, spoon, rinse. He greets me with a polite, "Morning," and nothing else. The space between us hums louder than the refrigerator. I ask if he's angry. He says, "I'm past that." I tell him I don't like cryptic answers. He says, "They're not cryptic if you listen." Milo bursts in wearing mismatched socks, laughing. The tension dissolves for a second. Gareth helps him with his shoes, gentle, focused, the kind of father patience that used to make me love him. Watching him now makes me ache, but not in the way I expect. It's the ache of something slipping out of reach, while I pretend it isn't. After they leave for school, I call Pippa. She's half asleep. I tell her Gareth's becoming robotic, that everything feels staged. "He's trying to scare you," she says. "Act normal. Go out. Make him jealous if you have to." Her advice always sounds like freedom, but ends up feeling like static in my head. I spend the day cleaning, partly to avoid thinking. Gareth's office is too tidy, folders labeled, cords wrapped, even the dust wiped from the keyboard. When I sit in his chair, I see a small sticky note on the desk edge. Paper drop, 3 p.m. I try to convince myself it's work. Still, I open drawers I shouldn't. In the second one, I find a small black notebook filled with dates and short lines, quiet records of our life, written in his neat handwriting. May 3rd, she stayed in the garden after sunset. May 8th, photo posted. Laughing with him. May 14th, Milo mentioned his name again. I shut it fast. My heart stutters. It's not rage that hits me. It's humiliation. He's been keeping score, turning every second into evidence. When he gets home that night, I'm already in the living room, wine in hand. I tell him we need to talk. He says, "Finally." I accuse him of spying, of writing things to twist the story. He says he's writing facts. I tell him he's being manipulative. He says, "You invented that word in this house." I ask what he wants from me, an apology, a confession, a performance. He says, "None of those, just truth." I say he wouldn't know truth if it kissed him on the mouth. He looks at me then, calm, almost pitying. "Maybe you're right," he says. That's why I'm letting someone else look at it. I frown. Someone else? He stands, clears his glass, and says, "You'll see. It's being handled properly now." The words lodge like glass under my skin. Properly. That's his new favorite word, the kind that sounds safe but means the opposite. I ask if he's threatening me. He says, "No, I don't threaten. I prepare." Then he goes upstairs. I stay awake late, scrolling through messages with Evan, rereading old jokes that now feel too loud. He sends a winking emoji. I don't reply. My reflection in the phone screen looks foreign, someone I'd call selfish if it wasn't me. The next morning, Gareth leaves early again. The house feels sterile without his presence. I check the hallway table, his keys, his notebook, a new envelope marked Archive A. Inside are USBs labeled by date. I don't dare plug them in. My stomach twists imagining what's on them. Pippa texts mid-morning, "Come out tonight," drinks at the lounge. I tell her I shouldn't. She sends back a string of eye-roll emojis. By evening, I give in. The lounge is crowded, lights soft and flattering. People I half know from work wave. Some whisper. I pretend not to notice. When Pippa goes to the bar, Evan appears like the universe conspiring. He says he thought he might find me here. I ask how. He shrugs. Lucky guess. He looks good, effortless. We talk about nothing important, and yet everything in me wants to prove I'm fine. He says I look tense, that I should relax. I tell him my husband is impossible. He says, "You deserve more than someone who watches you like a case file." I laugh, but it sounds hollow. He touches my hand lightly. It's a small thing, but in that moment, I feel the pull of being seen. Then I notice a woman near the bar filming a group selfie, her camera panning too wide, catching us in the frame. My throat tightens. I pull my hand back. Evan raises his brows, amused. "You okay?" he asks. I say yes, but my chest won't stop pounding. When I get home, Gareth's car is in the driveway. He's at the kitchen table, laptop open. I tell him I went out with Pippa. He nods. "I know," he says. I ask how. "You posted a photo." I freeze. I didn't. Pippa must have tagged me. He turns the screen toward me. There it is, me laughing beside Evan, our faces half lit by bar lights. "You said you were just with your sister," he says quietly. I try to explain it was coincidence, harmless, nothing. He closes the laptop. That word again. I slam my hand on the counter. "You're turning everything into a crime scene." He studies me like he's memorizing every reaction. "I'm not turning it into anything," he says. "I'm recording what's already there." His voice is calm, patient, terrifying. I tell him I won't live like a suspect. He says, "Then stop acting like one." I laugh, sharp and shaking. "You think you'll win by pretending to be the hero?" He says, "No, just the adult." When he goes upstairs, I pour another glass of wine and call Pippa again. I tell her he's gone cold, that he's talking about lawyers without saying the word. She says he's bluffing, that no man wants to lose his family. "He'll cave," she says. "You always had the upper hand." But I'm not so sure anymore. The next day, Milo comes home from school with a permission slip. I hand it to Gareth to sign, but he pauses halfway. "We should discuss logistics," he says, "if schedules change soon." I ask what he means. He says, "You'll find out." That night, we barely speak. He works in the guest room. I stay in bed, pretending to sleep. I hear faint clicks. The printer again. The soft crinkle of envelopes being sealed. A mechanical lullaby. By Thursday, the tension is unbearable. I try to corner him at breakfast, force a conversation. "What are you doing, Gareth?" I ask. "Collecting souvenirs?" He looks up from his coffee. "Clarity," he says. "That's all." I tell him he's scaring me. He says, "Good. Fear means you finally see something real." I snap that he's cruel, that he's destroying our marriage on purpose. He tilts his head. "I'm not destroying it. I'm concluding it." Something inside me breaks. I start listing everything I've done: cleaning, cooking, keeping the house alive. He listens, expression steady, then says, "Respect follows results. You taught me that, remember?" The way he repeats my own old line makes my stomach turn. Later, when he leaves for work, I check his study again. The drawer is locked, but the faint glow of his computer screen shows a message: "File uploaded successfully." I step back, heart hammering. The garden outside looks too quiet, the lilac bush bending slightly in the wind. I tell myself it's just paperwork, something dull and domestic. But the truth presses at the edge of my mind. Whatever he's been planning isn't waiting anymore. That evening, he comes home later than usual. He eats quietly, helps Milo with his bag for school, then turns to me. "I'll be out early tomorrow," he says. "There's something to finalize." I ask if it's about us. He nods once. Everything's about us now. When he kisses Milo goodnight, I feel the distance like a wall. He turns to me before heading upstairs. "You don't need to worry," he says. "I'll handle it properly." I want to laugh, to scream, to ask what that even means, but I don't. I just watch him disappear down the hall, his calm footsteps fading toward the guest room, where the quiet machinery waits again, steady as truth, printing the end I still refuse to name. The courthouse plaza smells like rain and coffee. I came because Gareth texted, "We need to meet. Bring your ID." I thought he wanted to talk, maybe reconcile. He's standing by the fountain, crisp as ever, holding Milo's backpack and a sealed envelope. When I reach him, he doesn't smile. A man in a dark jacket steps forward and says my name. I nod automatically. He hands me papers, official and heavy. The top page reads temporary orders, custody and property. My mouth opens, but no words form. Gareth thanks the man, then turns to me. "Everything's arranged. You'll get the schedule by email." I say he can't just decide this here. He says, "The court already did." Around us, people keep walking, uninterested, the world moving on. Milo runs from Lorna's car nearby, calling for his dad. Gareth kneels, hugs him, whispers something I can't hear. When he straightens, he doesn't look at me again. The papers slip from my hands, pages fluttering across the wet stone, and for the first time, I understand that his silence was never surrender. It was the sound of the end.